Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. I hope that you can all hear me well. So thanks for joining this training webinar from the Hospital on FHIR lab series. If you have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A mechanism. Due to my colleague being in vacation, I'm alone in managing this webinar, so I ask for your understanding if there are some delay in the response. Okay. Can everyone see the presentation? Perfect. So welcome everyone for this third webinar of the series, which is a collaboration between Hospitals on FHIR, HL7 Europe, and the XiA project. As a quick reminder, Hospital on FHIR is a community of more than 100 hospitals across the continent and one in Mexico, where we work together, sharing experience and use case to increase our knowledge of FHIR. XiA is an Erasmus project, which has the goal of creating the skills we need for EHDS. So this is part of the Pact for Skills European initiative. So both this project and HL7 Europe are part of the Pact for Skills. This webinar series is focused on the lab report. The goal is that we give all the information and training necessary for understanding how a project could implement the lab in a hospital. Okay, so without waiting more, this webinar about HL7 FHIR is presented by myself. So I'm an HL7 Europe in-house expert, so I work with HL7 Europe on a few different projects, some of them about cancer. And in that context, we have just launched today the Phoenix initiative, which is about creating a European common cancer model. I'm also the CEO of my own consulting company, which is called Fyrstain. And I'm one of the French ambassadors for Hospitals on FHIR, which is the community. And as Fyrstain, we are part of the XiA project. So, what is FHIR? So the goal today is not to go into technical details of what FHIR is, but that you understand the HL7 FHIR as a standard, what it can be used for, and what it brings. So in order to do that, what we're going to be seeing is, well, what is FHIR? What kind of paradigm are behind FHIR? What can we do once we have FHIR data? What does it look like in practice? And why we believe that FHIR is an actual paradigm shift. So the goal is that you understand the basic of FHIR, why it matters, and if there were three things to remember, it's that it's the modern interoperability standard, that it's easy to use and extend, and that it's already widespread around the globe. So in the US, in Asia, in India. So what is HL7 FHIR? FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. It's a standard developed by HL7, which is not a standard, but a standard organization which has developed very successful standards like HL7v2 or HL7 CDA. It's based on a resource concept, on REST APIs, and on formats that are widespread around developers like JSON or XML. It's provide a way to structure and exchange data. It enables many applications in the same ecosystem to work together without needing to be the same technology or vendors. It defines of information and it creates a language that's shared between technical people, clinician, and decision maker. And of course, it uses modern web standards like HTTP, and that allows us to reuse existing tools and infrastructure using that paradigm. FHIR is a standard that was created for developers. So it's important to understand that it was in the goal of making EF go into the web era and having a standard that would allow the creation of web-based apps. So it's no right reserved license, so you can use it. It's free of charge, and it's very community-based. So the standard is evolving and is tested by the community during FHIR Connectathons. There is going to be an HL7 International Connectathon in Rotterdam in May. A small warning, FHIR is not about standard storage. We hear about FHIR repositories. They are database with a persistence layer, and then you have FHIR APIs on top of that. But FHIR is not the database. FHIR is really the web exchange built upon that. So if we go to the actual paradigm of FHIR, we have FHIR resources. So a FHIR resources is a concept, a data unit, which represents something in healthcare, like a patient, a medication, a practitioner. And there are modular and interoperable, so that they can be combined to describe complex healthcare workflows. The HL7 use 80-20 rule, so that means that the data elements present in FHIR resources represent 80% of the use case that are included in the core specification, and the other content is managed using extension. So you can actually reuse the resource and extend them to fit your needs if there is a need to. So for example, a patient resource in JSON, look at that. So you have the type of resource, you have the ID, and you have name, family, given. It's a format that's quite readable, even for a non-IT people. And in the specification, you can see the UML here. In the real world, that resources would be used to represent clinical information, administrative, research, or even terminologies. But FHIR by itself is by no means interoperable. That's where you have the concept of FHIR profiles. Because, for example, a FHIR patient can represent a patient in an emergency room, a patient at the doctor, or an animal to the vet. So in order to make FHIR interoperable, we need to constrain it using profiles, which are, for my use case, here is how I'm going to be using these FHIR resources. They can restrict, extend, but every constraint I add make it more interoperable for my use case, but less reusable somewhere else. So that's always a trade-off between the two. As an example, we have here a profile for the lab observation. So you will have extensions, you can have slicing, you can have reference other profiles, you can link to some value sets, but it's constrained the observation resource into something shared across the EU for the laboratory. And then once you have your actual model of data, you need to share it with the outside world. So that's where the data transportation part takes place. So the main way to transport FHIR is through HTTP. So that means that you use web URLs like what you use in your navigator to actually either get read or search information, delete it, create it, update it, and then you do those operations on a FHIR server. So what's interesting with that is this is common web paradigms, and they are very easy to implement. So if we want to show it in practice, so for example, this is Happy is the open source FHIR server by default, and this is one of their base test server. So if I go here, you will see that it will return a bundle, which is a search set with lots of patient pagination, but I get the information of lots of patients in here. So that's actually very easy to implement. And for example, if I take this patient, I want to have more detail and see on it, I will have the information here. So it's very easy to manipulate. So there are some common tools you can use to explore FHIR. Any REST clients like Postman, you have some test server. And for profiles, you have the registry, which register all public profiles in the ecosystem. Now, one thing that for me the most impactful in FHIR is the notion of operations. So it's a way that we can actually standardize processes. So operation are extension of the basic FHIR calls by naming processes like validation, translation, but also business operation like merging a patient. $merge operation allows for patient merge. You don't need to understand the logic behind, because the logic is not going to be the same in Japan, in France, or in Germany. But the API to call for patient merge in FHIR is going to be the same interface everywhere in the world. So that means that you can design your system and reuse those interfaces without having to understand the local regulation that goes behind this operation. So yeah, that's for me one of the main thing behind FHIR that changed everything. It's this notion that we can standardize processes. But then that's just FHIR itself. And once you have your data and your process, you can actually go much further than that. For example, you have another HL7 standard, which is HL7 SQL for clinical quality language. You can use that to describe processes, decision trees, care plans. It's based on FHIR resources, and you can execute that on a FHIR server. So that means that you can be doing measures if you want to have the information of how many patients did not show up for their appointment. If you have the appointment information in your FHIR server, you can define a metric based on that using SQL. You can define whether a patient is included in a study, and that's shareable, reusable, and testable. Then we have the FHIR mapping language. One of the biggest challenges we face is the data ecosystem in healthcare is fragmented, non-structured, and very vendor or healthcare provider specific. FHIR mapping language allows for specification of those mappings to keep a trace of how the data is transformed, but also it provides some kind of execution mechanism, which means that you have defined your mapping, for example, between an HL7 FHIR message and an HL7 v2 message, and you can execute that to transform and go from one to the other. Another standard is HL7 FHIR, which stands for FHIR shorthand. It's a specification that allows for easier specification writing because it's diminish the complexity of the FHIR resources to generate actual implementation guide and specification. And lastly, for example, you have HL7's CDS hooks. So CDS stands for Clinical Decision Support. So in that case, let's say I'm an EHR and I want to prescribe a medication. It will trigger a CDS hooks on hooks which are prescription. Then the CDS service will be identified. It will gather the information from the FHIR server, and it will return the results on the GUI of the practitioner. So that means that my combined with SQL, for example, if I have the role of contraindication of the prescription, I can automatize practitioner feedback in a standardized way. Now, let's take a look at what it can look like in practice. This is actually a use case I'm working on with some hospital. I get my HL7 v2 lab message. It's not standardized in the meaning that it uses local laboratory codes. Using the transform operation we have seen with the FHIR mapping language and calls to a terminology service, translation operation, we are going to get an HL7 Europe FHIR lab report, which has the local lab codes, but also LOINC and Athena codes. Then this lab report is being evaluated through a SQL rule, and it will allow to detect abnormal or critical results and notify a practitioner. So that's one usage. And the other is for research, because then once you have that data structured in FHIR, you can use that to export a CSV or OMOP data mart with the right informations. So why is FHIR paradigm shift? This is based on the European interoperability framework for healthcare, which is divided in 6 levels. You have legal and regulatory, policy, care process, information, applications, and IT infrastructure. HL7 v2 was a standard which was only targeting the application level. CDA had more semantic support, and you were addressing both information and application level. Now FHIR, it's provide the technical means to support all the interoperability layers, whether it be regulatory, policy, care process, information, application, IT infrastructure. You can actually, in your implementation guide, have all kind of information around that. If I illustrate that with the use case I previously shared, we have the transformation, translation, evaluation, operation. That's IT infrastructure, because I'm standardizing how the infrastructure is reacting, and reusable, because the terminology service can be asked for by any app, and so can the transformation or the evaluation operation. Then you have the actual file format for the lab report, which can be used by application to actually display it, for example. The terminology service has LOINC, Athena value sets, and the actual mappings from the hospital codes to those standards. And then you have the secure library, which are medical knowledge. It can be from a medical society. It can be from the local doctor in the hospital. But that's part of the care process. Now you can modelize right management using FHIR permission for practitioner access, because you don't want, if you're centralizing the data, you don't want everyone to have access to all kind of information. And then you have legal and regulatory aspect, because you actually have the EHRXF and the HL7 Europe lab implementation guide. So as you can see, with one use case using FHIR, we are transversal to all 6 domains. And lastly, why FHIR is a paradigm shift is it does not try to replace other standards. It's a standard which builds upon what is already existing and actually integrate previous standards, current standards, and it just unify the way the standards are exchanged. So it's more of a transversal layer that adds rather than try to remove things from the hospital. So to conclude, FHIR is the modern standard for healthcare interoperability on the web level. It's simple but very powerful, and it's already adopted widely in Europe and worldwide. So I think we should just get started on it. Okay. I think I'm right on time, so we have the time for some question. I see Kevin is asking a question in the chat. So how are we sharing the Europe lab report? So in the use case I showed, it's not really that we are sharing it. It's about how we are using it inside the hospital. This is not being shared with another hospital. This is inside the hospital IT system that we actually transform existing message into that format and use it. And then once you have this FHIR bundle document with all the information, you could send it to someone else and sharing it. We did experiment in the XiA project with the recording. With the QR code to access the documents. There is also just the way to access it through REST APIs, because once it's in the FHIR server of the hospital, you can just grab it. And then you can also send it through notification by pushing it. So right now, there is not a lot of use case about sharing it. Not at least in the one I'm working with, where it's more about how do we use it. And we are counting on the EHDS to actually give us some information on how to share it and receive it so that it can be used internally. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the XiA project YouTube channel. Do we have more question, or was I so clear that there is no question? I guess that means that there is no question anymore. If you guys are interested in the next step, we are we have the fourth webinar about implementation guides on May 29th. So if you want to register, you can use this QR code. If you're a hospital and you want to learn more about hospital and FHIR and project sharing and artifact sharing, please join our community. And if you're interested in training more about HDS, about FHIR, about, well, all the semantics, well, there is a XiA community of practice, which is being set up, and it would be lovely to have you guys with us. No, there is no quiz today. Thanks, everyone. And I hope this was interesting to you and that you will continue with us on our journey towards a shareable European lab report. Thank you, guys, and have a great day, everyone.